Wow, aren't we lucky to have heard that original recording of a tin merchant working on some tin, of course, as that's what tin merchants did, and we all know that. Many thanks again to the British Museum for providing this original recording. Just exquisite, isn't it? Well, hello there, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. I'm not sure if I mentioned this last week, but I wanted to mention it because I thought it was really funny. And what I'll do is I'll try and find an image of it and attach it to the description in this week's podcast, so that you're able to see it. And what it is it's supposedly an image of Shakespeare that is the most accurate image of Shakespeare that there is. And let's just say it's not quite how I pictured him from the portraits and stuff of him. He looks sort of more like a funny little man, less cool, I'd say. And it's I believe it's a sculpture rather than a painting, and he just looks proportionally a bit different. And I had a good laugh looking at it. No offense on Shakespeare. I mean, he's a good looking guy, you know, and I still respect him, but he just looks a bit different. Less sort of Shoreditch hipster, more Shoreditch banker, maybe. So I'll try and find a link to that and pop it on the description to the podcast, and then maybe you can have a little laugh or just be interested for yourself, you know. The good thing is he still has the hoop earring, the little gold hoop earring, so that is consistent, at least. Right, today we're looking at Sonnet 62, so let's have a listen, shall we? Sin of self-love possesseth all mine eye, and all my soul, and all my every part. And for this sin there is no remedy. It is so grounded inward in my heart. Methinks no face so gracious as mine, no shape so true, no truth of such account, and for myself mine own worth do define, as I all other in all worths surmount. But when my glass shows me myself indeed, beated and chopp'd with tan's antiquity, mine own self-love quite contrary I read, self so self-loving were iniquity. 'Tis thee, myself, that for myself I praise, painting mine age with beauty of thy days. Wow, I think Shakespeare's really found his stride in these last few sonnets. I've really enjoyed, I'd say, the last 5. There hasn't been a dud, which, to be honest, is quite rare to go that many without a bad one for Shakespeare. So well done to him. And this one starts off very arrogant, doesn't it? I mean, he's really just bigging himself up, saying he's the best thing since sliced bread. Maybe sliced bread didn't exist back then, don't know. What would it have been then? The best thing since sliced, or not sliced, maybe just the best thing since ale, the invention of ale. That's what he's saying. And then it takes a turn, of course. It's Shakespeare. What did you expect? He's not just going to big himself up for the whole sonnet. It takes a turn and it ends up talking about his lover again, and how actually when he looks in the mirror he's not so great, not so hot. Anyway, I think it's time we dive into Sonnet 62 and work out what the hell Shakespeare is going on about line by line. So we start with, sin of self-love possesseth all mine eye, and all my soul, and all my every part. And I'll tell you what, how many takes have I had to do for the word possesseth? That's a tough one. Try saying that quickly 5 times. Not going to happen. Very tough. Sin of self-love possesseth all mine eye. So he's saying here, basically the sin that is self-love controls everything I see. And it encompasses me. It's my entire soul and every part of me. Self-love is. And for this sin, there is no remedy. It is so grounded inward in my heart. So there's no way to get rid of this sin, all right? It is grounded. It is deeply rooted in my heart. It's interesting, isn't it, that he's saying self-love is a sin? Because now we probably say that it's a good thing to love yourself and to appreciate yourself, and it's something we don't do enough. I mean, in the words of RuPaul, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? I mean, Shakespeare should have listened to RuPaul here, really. Anyway, we continue with, methinks no face so gracious is as mine, no shape so true, no truth of such account. So he's going on here to talk about how much he loves himself, of course, because that's what he's been talking about in these first few lines. So he's saying, I'm pretty sure that no one's face is as gorgeous as mine. There's no body that is as perfect as mine, is ripped, probably. Or maybe that wasn't the beauty standard back then. But when you look at statues and stuff, they did always make people ripped. Interesting that sort of muscles and stuff has often been, throughout history, the ideal body for a man. That's just a little bit of history there. A little history lesson. So there's no face as hot as mine, no body as ripped as mine, and no one has got as much integrity as me. All right? It's as simple as that. I am amazing. And for myself, mine own worth do define, as I all other in all worths surmount. So here he's saying, I think, that he values himself so highly that he surpasses everyone else. He is thinking himself better than everyone in every way. I mean, that is truly self-love, isn't it? I mean, that might be taking self-love a little bit too far. Obviously, it's good to appreciate yourself and love yourself more, but maybe saying that you're better than everyone else and that you're better looking and just better as a person, as a human than every other human is maybe just tipping too far into that self-love territory. And now get ready for the but, of course, because it's coming. But when my glass shows me myself indeed, beated and chopped with tanned antiquity. So here he's saying, but after thinking all of that, when I actually look in the mirror, glass, mirror, we've talked about that before. Remember, keep up. And he's saying, when I actually look in the mirror, I see how I really look, and it is not so good. And he realizes that he's actually beaten and chopped by age and the sun. I think he's talking about sun damage here. Beated is a way that is part of the tanning process, I believe. So he's talking about, and tanned, of course, he mentions. So he's saying beaten and chopped with tanned antiquity. So he's saying, you know, I've been out in the sun too much as well. So get your SPF on. I mean, if even Shakespeare is talking about it 500 years ago, let's get talking about sun safety. Us Brits, we're not good enough with it. I know that other countries around the world are better than us, that's for sure. We go out, whenever there's a bit of sun, we go out in the blazing heat at midday and just bake ourselves into lobsters. And that is not great, because look, it's been around for years in the English culture. Clearly, Shakespeare's saying that he did the same, and that's what's made him aged and ugly and cracked and beated. So if this isn't an advert for sun cream and getting that SPF all over your face and body, then I don't know what is. And I said this podcast wouldn't ever have adverts, but I feel like that's a pretty good one. And it's not for a brand in particular, it's just all sun cream and SPFs ever. All of the ones ever created. There you go. And then he continues with, mine own self-love, quite contrary, I read, self so self-loving were iniquity. Bit of a mouthful, that one. I was enjoying it until that. Self so self-loving were iniquity. So here he's saying that he's come to quite the opposite conclusion, actually, than he was talking about in the first 6 or 7 lines. He's actually saying now that he's realised that self-loving and loving yourself that much is a sinful error. It's a big mistake and wrong. So I'm glad he's admitted that here, because he was getting a bit arrogant, which he is wont to do sometimes, Shakespeare. And now, of course, we're on to the final couplet, which is, "'Tis thee, myself, that for myself I praise, painting my image with beauty of thy days." And here he's saying, it's you, actually, that I'm praising when I praise myself. Again, it's that thing that we've talked about in the past and has come up in a few of his sonnets, that he is one with his lover. He is his lover in a lot of these sonnets. There's so much similarity. And he's saying, it's you that I'm praising when I praise myself. And then he's saying, I'm basically dressing up my age with the beauty of your looks. So here there's that age difference again. There's the lover is clearly younger than Shakespeare here. How many years? We don't know. Hopefully not too many years. Please, 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 not too many years. Please let the age gap be of consent age at least. All right? Shakespeare? Yeah, okay. Are you listening? So he's really saying, when I talk about loving myself so much, it's actually praising you and praising your beauty. So that's Sonnet 62, and I like it. It's a good one. We go on a journey, talks about how much he loves himself, but then goes on that journey of realization and suddenly goes, oh no, I don't actually love myself that much, and I shouldn't love myself that much because that's a bit of a sin. And actually, I realised that this love is just all for you, in fact. I like his sonnets where he goes through a realisation process, and in my head I like that he's just sort of writing, and then, a realisation, there it is. And then writes the rest of the sonnet, but he probably plans it out, doesn't he? Maybe he's not as spontaneous as I'm imagining him here. Right, I think it's about time to put this to our story. And if you remember, last week, Shakespeare had sent his cat, Mercutio, off to Barbados again to chat to Christopher Marlowe. Well, not chat to him, to deliver the sonnet that Shakespeare had written to Christopher Marlowe, obviously again saying how much he loved him, etc., etc. And Mercutio's on the beach, Christopher Marlowe's there with his lovely, sexy men that he has around him at all times, and he's just got one of the sexy men to read Sonnet 61 to him, and that's where we've left off. Let's find out what happens next. One of Christopher Marlowe's hot young men finishes reading Sonnet 61. Christopher Marlowe says, not bad. Clearly he's a bit jealous of me, isn't he? And all the men laugh. And Christopher Marlowe says, well, he has a right to be. I mean, I've got you gorgeous men around me. And all the men laugh again. Even Mercutio joins in with the laughter. And Christopher Marlowe says, well, I better send him a message back to say that at least I'm thinking of him. It might be good to have Shakespeare in my pocket a little longer. He is of high status after all. So he scrawls a note back to Shakespeare that says, thanks for the letter, Will. I'm just sitting on the beach sipping on pina coladas with a few of my young hot friends, and thought, I wish Willie was here. That should tempt him enough. Then he looked at Mercutio and said, look, I don't want you to deliver this. You've clearly travelled very far, and I'd love you to stay on the beach with me and have fun. And Mercutio, relieved, nodded his head enthusiastically. And so Christopher Marlowe got one of his young hot men to deliver the message to Shakespeare. This lovely blonde hunk travelled the seas and spent many months journeying all the way from Barbados to London. Eventually he arrived at Shakespeare's house. He was bedraggled, but still clearly gorgeous. Shakespeare answered the door and said, "Hello, who's this?" And the young man said, "A message from Christopher Marlowe." And Shakespeare said, "And who are you? What's your deal?" And the young man said, "Oh, nobody, just one of Christopher's friends." And Shakespeare said, "Okay, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but you can go now. You can go back to Barbados now." And the young man said, "Thank you. Have a good one, Willie." William Shakespeare shut the door, fuming. He was annoyed that Christopher Marlowe had sent such a hot young man to him. He read the message and thought, well, at least he's replied this time. At least he actually still cares about me. And look, he wants me to come to Barbados. Maybe I'll go sometime. That'd be a nice little holiday. But then he thought, hold on, where the hell's Mercutio? Wasn't he meant to deliver this message back to me? He must have stayed in Barbados, the little bastard. Damn that Mercutio. And then he thought, oh God, I'm going to need someone to deliver my next sonnet to Christopher Marlowe. And if Mercutio hasn't come back, it'll have to be that hot young man who's just left. So he quickly ran out into the street and called the young man back into his house. The young man came in and Shakespeare said, look, I need you to deliver a message back to Christopher Marlowe if you don't mind. I haven't written it yet, so I'm just going to write it now. Do you want a cup of tea? And the young man said, okay, Willie, that'd be lovely. So Shakespeare popped the kettle on and said, look, if you were going to write a sonnet to Christopher Marlowe, because you obviously know him quite well, what would you sort of put in it? What would make him sort of into me? And the young man said, well, I think you've got to big your looks up a little bit more. I mean, you haven't really mentioned how hot you are in your sonnets to him before. So maybe that would work quite well. And Shakespeare said, yes. And then what I can do is that I can sort of turn the sonnet towards the end and make it seem like he is hot as well. Like I'm hot, but then I'm not maybe, and then he's hot. And the young man said, yeah, sure. Or you could just say that you're hot and just leave it at that. And Shakespeare said, well, no, because I'm sort of more clever than that. It's got to be about me and him being one. And the young man said, look, do whatever you want. You wanted my advice, I gave you it, all right? Shakespeare said, yeah, all right, don't get snotty with me, dude. And he went off into his little writer's room and penned Sonnet 62. He came back down and gave it to the young man. The young man started to read it, and Shakespeare said, excuse me, that's not for you. And the young man said, well, look, I'm going to read it at some point on this trip, so I might as well read it now. And he read it over and said, I don't really get it, mate, to be honest. And Shakespeare said, yeah, well, I didn't think you would, because you're not intelligent enough, but Christopher Marlowe would get it. And the young man laughed and said, Christopher Marlowe is not an intelligent man. And Shakespeare said, he is, all right, and he's hot. And I'm going to make him my boyfriend. So there. And he said, you get out of my house and deliver that message back to him, for God's sake. And so the young man turned on his heels and left London. He embarked on another 3 or 4 month trip, all the way back to Barbados. Some say that on his trip he made a few changes to the sonnet, but this has not been proven by historians. Eventually the young man made it back to Barbados and said, oh Christopher, Christopher Marlowe and Mercutio were quite drunk on pina coladas, and they were rolling around on the beach, laughing and joking and having the best of times. And Christopher Marlowe said, it must be a letter back from our friend Shakespeare. And they both started giggling. And Christopher Marlowe said, well then, you better read it to me. "Come, everyone," and he called everyone on the beach to gather round and listen to Shakespeare's latest sonnet. The young man pulled the sonnet from his back pocket and read. Sonnet 62. I bloody love myself, and my self-love controls my entire soul and every part of me. There is no way to get rid of this sin, as it is deeply grounded in my heart. I think there's no face as hot as mine, no body as ripped, no one as perfect as me. I value myself higher than everybody else. But when I look in the mirror, and it shows me how I really look, beaten and damaged by age and sun, I realise it would actually be a sin to love myself this much. It's you that I'm praising when I praise myself, dressing up my age with the beauty of your looks. Well, there we are, the end of episode 62. This story is getting a bit wild, and I still need to find out why Christopher Marlowe is in Barbados. Someone needs to tell me. Come on. Come on, story writer. Please tell us. Maybe he will next week. Until then,